Hey guys, back again. I want to talk about something in the Sonic movie universe. I talked about this in my podcast, GG Gaming. Um, it wasn't really too much spoiler territory, and that's why I talked about it there. But because I recently made that video talking about that plot hole in the Sonic 2 movie, I wanted to discuss my ideas for where they could go with the story in case Jim Carrey decides not to return as Robotnik. There's actually a few ideas that where they can go. So you could take this as theories. You could take this as fan ideas. You could take this however you want. But from my end, it's just, I guess, theoretical predicting in case of that happens. So I'll briefly go over what I was talking about, or maybe not briefly. I don't know. This is unplanned. So first of all, Jim Carrey said he was going to retire from acting unless a script was really like from the gods, like I would assume that means it's a really good script or near and dear to his heart in a sense. I remember a while back before the first movie came out, this now don't quote me on this because I'm trying to remember, this was a while ago. I think he said when he was preparing for the role of Robotnik that his grandson was a fan of the games. So it seems, Jim Carrey said, he said I have enough, and I think what he meant is in terms of money. So it doesn't seem like any amount of money in the world could get him to join any movie. But it has to be special to him. And I don't know if that means that because his grandson might be a fan of Sonic, that the role of Robotnik is special to him personally. And I don't know about you guys, but I love Jim Carrey and his roles that he plays, but I feel like his role as Robotnik for the first time in a long time is one of his most iconic roles. And that could just be me. But I feel like there's a lot of love around that, and maybe that's true. So there's some really big characters he's played in movies, like Lloyd from Dumb and Dumber. I think that was the character's name, and Ace Ventura, which I think the character's name was Ace Ventura. Again, it's been so long since I was a little kid when I saw those movies, and I never really watched them after the fact. So they're so much of a blur to me. So the point I'm getting at, I know I'm just rambling, is I think that this role might be one of those few roles that he really would love to continue playing. And that theory of mine is backed up by something the producers, I believe that the producers said in an interview with IGN that, they said, oh, we would love to have Jim Carrey return. Something like he's part of the Sonic family, and they would never replace him, and they would love to have him as long as he wanted to be there. But then one of them chimed in saying, "Oh God, this is unscripted and unedited, so bear with me for a moment." He said something along the lines of, like, "I have a feeling Jim wouldn't want to quit playing this role so soon," or something along the lines. So, which made me think one of two things: either one, they've already had that conversation with Jim Carrey, and are pretty sure that he's not gonna stop playing Robotnik, at least in the near future. And the other thing is they could be throwing him under the bus, and setting him up to feel like he has to commit, otherwise face backlash. Now, I hope that's not the case, and I like to imagine it's not the case. I'm just throwing that out there. That's possible. But so I don't want to get my hopes up too high, but it sounds like Jim Carrey will be returning as Robotnik even past movie 3, if they go past movie 3. And that's just maybe wishful thinking based on just trying to pick apart things that I remember, things that I'm seeing in interviews, etc. So with that out of the way, if he does not return, there's a couple of things that I think could serve as ways to continue the series without him, because Robotnik slash Eggman while the main and most important villain in the Sonic video game franchise is not the only villain. I mean, obviously he has the most screen time. That's like the equivalent for Mario to be the Bowser. I mean, there are other villains, but it's mostly Bowser. Or for Zelda, the Ganon slash Ganondorf, it's mostly Ganon or Ganondorf, but there are other villains as well. So with that in mind, I think what they're trying to do by adapting stories and things from the games, just like how the Marvel Cinematic Universe is adapting some of those comics. They're not following the comics from issue 1 and retelling the stories. They're taking bits and pieces and adapting them. So I think, so here's idea 1. There's a villainous entity known as the Battle Cuckoo Empire in Tails Sky Patrol. Yeah, I sometimes mix it up with Tails Adventure, but Tails Sky Patrol. And I could be mixing up the name because in the Archie comics they were called the Battlebird Armada and then the Battlebird Empire, I think. So, but I believe in the games they're called the Battle Cuckoo Empire. And there's a couple of things that I think they can go. And this is again, I mean, this will be in the title, but spoiler warnings for my ideas. So for the prequel comic and the movie of the second movie, they had important bird characters. The Longclaw and her tribe were all owls, or at least birds. But we've only seen owls. And then there were the scavengers that Knuckles gets kidnapped by in the comics, and then who work for him in the comics, and also the beginning of the movie until they come across Robotnik on the Mushroom Planet, who are wearing what seems like bird masks. So I like to think they could be, whether intentionally or not, setting up the Battle Cuckoo Empire they can use in their back pocket down the line in case they need another villain. And, excuse me. So, Longclaw is part of a tribe, and I wouldn't necessarily say, oh, Longclaw was part of the Battle Cuckoo Empire. But you can build on that idea by saying that her tribe was an offshoot of the Battle Cuckoo Empire, or you can say the Battle Cuckoo Empire might be a group of descendants of Longclaw's tribe who are trying to continue the work that they started, but maybe they kind of went rogue, or they turned their ways and they're like, oh yeah, we're superior to everyone else. We're the birds, and we want the Master Emerald back so that we could control everything. You know, there's so many ideas they can do with it, but I think the Battle Cuckoo Empire is one idea as a villainous threat or villainous force, and that one itself has a leader, and he has a son. I believe it's a son. And I forget their exact names. I think it's the leader's Battle Cuckoo. Some number, 15th, maybe. I don't know. I don't remember the number, and I feel like a terrible Sonic fan for forgetting it. In the comics, his son was called Speedy, and I don't remember if he actually had the name Speedy in the games. And the comics I'm referring to are the Archie comics, which I'll get to in a moment for my other idea. But yeah, the whole idea is they could, if they wanted to, set up the idea of a new villainous force after this Robotnik / Eggman Empire. They could build up the Battle Cuckoo Empire, how they want to reclaim the emeralds or the Master Emerald. I'm a little unclear if I'm a little unclear if at the end of movie 2, when the emeralds came out of the Master Emerald, did Sonic put them back into the Master Emerald? Where exactly did he send them? Knuckles took those shards of the Master Emerald and put them back together. I'm assuming they're separate now, and there's a Master Emerald and Chaos Emeralds. That's what I'm assuming. I guess they have some powers connected to the Chaos Emeralds as a result of them being together all those years. Anyway, that's besides the point. Again, unscripted, just talking out ideas. But I think the Battle Cuckoo Empire could be a great idea for a new villainous threat, and you could tie it into Longclaw's tribe and explore some of the things in ancient times with the Battle Cuckoo Empire being like, oh yeah, we're birds, we're superior to everyone else, we destroyed the Echidna, even though I think they kind of destroyed each other. But I don't know exactly what happened between the two clans. But Knuckles is the last. I can see Speedy calling himself the last, or acting as Knuckles' rival in that sense, even though he's not the last bird, but maybe he would be like think of himself as Knuckles' rival because he's one of the last in that sense. Although in the games, and in the comics, I believe they set him up as Tails' rival because it was like a battle of who belongs in the skies. Like, oh, the skies are preserved for the birds, and they kind of made Speedy into the rival of Tails in the Archie comics with that in mind because Tails could fly. And it's like, oh, you're not supposed to fly. You're not a bird. And there was a rivalry set up in that sense, or antagonistic force. Basically, my idea is I think they could create the Battle Cuckoo Empire out of that. Another idea I have is kind of playing off of what the Archie comics did pre-reboot. The whole idea of Robotnik Prime, who was the Robotnik of the main comic universe, eventually his molecules dispersed from his Ultimate Annihilator machine around in issue 50. So there was Robotnik was killed off, and then what happens later on is a Robotnik from an alternate universe winds up taking up the mantle in a sense. He at first pretends to be Robotnik from Robotnik Prime. He winds up nuking his entire world and be like, oh, I won. And then he gets bored. And I think that goes in line with what comic writer Ian Flynn has been stating multiple times, that it's not enough for Robotnik to just win. He has to, or it's not enough for a victory, like an ultimate, like I could destroy them whenever I want. It's about outdoing Sonic. Like he wants to beat Sonic. Like it's not enough. So by nuking the planet, I think the idea is that it was not satisfying. I think originally intended he just got bored and was like, oh, here's a Sonic without a Robotnik, and I'm a Robotnik without a Sonic. I want to continue the game. But I guess if you really want to get into the meat of it, I suppose he never really truly outsmarted Sonic. He wound up nuking him in a future setting, I think, where Sonic was already with his family and whatnot. So I guess it was like what's the word, half victory or whatever you want to call it. So he winded up coming to the main content, the main universe in the pre-reboot of Archie Sonic, and he became Robotnik. And because of his version of Endgame, where Robotnik annihilated himself with his Ultimate Annihilator, this Robotnik winded up using the roboticizer on himself and becoming Robo-Robotnik. So when he gets defeated in the main continuity of the main universe in the Sonic continuity, Robo-Robotnik winds up, I guess, downloading or uploading, or whatever you want to call it, his thoughts, his mind, his consciousness into a robot of Robotnik in Sonic's universe, so apparently Robotnik Prime, I'm going to differentiate them between Robotnik Prime, which was the original in Sonic's universe, and Robo-Robotnik, as he was from an alternate universe, winded up. So Robotnik Prime had a whole bunch of robot duplicates of himself, all different shapes and sizes. And I guess they were all never activated, but they were in some kind of chamber. I don't know exactly what he was using them for. Maybe he planned to do some kind of fail-safe like this. So Robo-Robotnik sent his consciousness to one of those robots, which happened to be the one that looked like Eggman. And that's why Robotnik Prime and Eggman look so different. And I know this sounds like I'm rambling, but bear with me for a moment. This is all the backstory and context for my idea. And you might know where I'm going with it, but basically, I think that if Jim Carrey's version of Robotnik, if Jim Carrey doesn't want to return, they could kill off that Robotnik, and they could kill off Jim Carrey's Robotnik, and somehow bring in another entity, whether it's a Robotnik from another universe, because Jim Carrey's Robotnik does mention towards the end of Sonic 2 something about conquering the universe and then conquering the multiverse. Then he says something after that I can't hear. I'm like, or this is just enough or something like that. But I think it's possible they could bring in a Robotnik from an alternate universe, in which case it could really be any actor, and do something where he succeeds the mantle of Robotnik. They said they wouldn't replace Jim Carrey, and this is a way to do it without replacing or recasting in a sense. Like, yes, you are the only Robotnik. Jim Carrey's the only Robotnik in this universe, and now we have Robotnik from another universe come in, and they could play something similar where he's the one who takes on the name of Eggman because Sonic keeps calling him Eggman, and he's like, you know what? I am the Eggman. He's gonna own up to it. And like have a different take on Robotnik, so that he's not an attempt at replacing or he's not an attempt at recasting Jim Carrey as Robotnik, but he truly is a different Robotnik, but still takes up the mantle so that you could continue using Robotnik. Alternatively, you can have another character, and it doesn't have to be a Robotnik from another universe, but someone like Agent Stone. In the official prequel comic for the Sonic 2 movie, there's this whole list of instructions that Stone is going through in order to, I feel like it's a little unclear, not necessarily replace him, but to take up some sort of mantle, unless he's setting up for Robotnik's return. I'm a little unclear on what the instructions are for Stone. I think it's kind of like, he's like, Robotnik's mentality in the movie seems to be everyone else is inferior to me, but Stone, you're better than everyone else, but still inferior to me. So I think he left those instructions for Stone to be like, if I'm gone, you are the next most superior person, even though you're still way inferior to me. You're the next superior person, so follow these instructions. So I can see Stone doing something like that, and then he won't be Robotnik, because Robotnik seems to actually be the birth name of sorts. I guess the birth name of Jim Carrey's Robotnik. But Eggman is a nickname, so I can see Stone taking up that mantle and being like, Robotnik may be gone, but the mantle of the Eggman lives on, or something like that. So that's my other idea of somebody else coming, of not necessarily another actor taking over the same role, but another character succeeding the mantle of Robotnik. So that's idea 2. I had a third idea, and I kind of lost it because as I was talking about the other stuff, it was building up in my head. Oh yeah, the idea of there being all these different planets. And we've seen Magic, and we've seen the other. We've seen other villains of the series. One of the other ones is Witch Cart from Tails Adventure. She seems to be a witch that can use magic. I can see her bringing in her gang from another planet, which would be interesting. So now instead of technology, there's magic. And then the Lost Hex from Sonic Lost World. That one, they seem to be fooling around with the ideas of different planets. So, I mean, you could somehow bring in the Lost Hex. Maybe it comes from another planet, gets warped in somehow. I don't think they would have had the Lost Hex floating around on Earth. But you could bring it in from another planet. The Lost Hex itself could be a different planet where they use a warp ring to come in. And I'm a little unclear on that map Longclaw left. Originally, I was under the assumption that all those planets on the map were the only planets, or the only inhabitable ones. But I think there's just a lot of planets, and maybe those ones in particular were ones that Longclaw deemed safe for Sonic to escape to, and kind of marked them off like this one's no longer safe, this one's no longer safe. I'm a little confused on that. But again, you could bring in the Deadly Six. They control machines and robotics just like how Robotnik was doing at the end of movie 2 with the Master Emerald. And then the last idea is Metal Sonic himself. He hasn't been introduced. I really thought that he was going to be the villain in not the villain, but I really thought he was going to be hinted at for movie 3, and maybe he still will be in movie 3, but I did not expect that Project Shadow mid credits scene. I thought that the 3 in the Sonic movie 3 logo was a hint at Metal Sonic's eyes, like his pupils, because it's that red. But I realized when I was looking at it that all the logos have that like digital look to it, so really was just a red 3. That could have been anything. It could have been Knuckles, and now it seems like it's going to be Shadow related, or they might wind up updating the logo later to have some Shadow flair to it. But again, just like how this movie just like how this movie adapted, like loosely adapted both Sonic 2 and 3, movie 3 doesn't necessarily have to only adapt one game, in which case it doesn't necessarily have to only be an adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2. It could be an adaptation of Sonic Adventure 2 and 1 or 2 other games. Maybe Shadow gets brought in, and then they bring in the Black Arms, and the Black Arms themselves are another villainous entity where we don't necessarily need Robotnik, because the Black Doom himself is the villain in that, and in which case it would be a Sonic Adventure 2 and a Shadow the Hedgehog game adaptation. And I wouldn't want them to get adapt too many things, because that's one of the reasons. That reminds me of one of the reasons why people didn't like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 3 movie, because they brought in too many villains, which didn't really seem to be the case for the latest Spider-Man movie, No Way Home, that had so many villains in it, but I guess because it had so many heroes. But anyway, the point is that there's a lot of villains that they can build up for this adaptation. I mean, sure, some of those villains, or most of them, were one-offs. But for a movie franchise that's loosely adapting ideas and game material, they could build up any of those one-offs as a main antagonistic threat for even a few movies. But I mean, obviously, one movie at least would be ideal. But what I was saying about Metal Sonic was, if in movie 3, Robotnik, like let's say it's Jim Carrey, or even if it's not, a Metal Sonic gets built, then we can have our Sonic Heroes adaptation in movie 4 or later, where he becomes Neo Metal Sonic and becomes the main villain for that movie. So, I mean, there's still a lot of different directions they could take for the Sonic movie universe in order to get around Jim Carrey not returning as Robotnik. But alas, it would still feel like really bad to not have him return, because he's a major part of that movie, and I mean the movie universe. But yeah, those are my thoughts. They're non-scripted, kind of messy, very spoiler heavy, and I just wanted to talk about my theories or ideas on where I think they could go, and what I think, where I think Jim Carrey might stand. I mean, none of this is confirmed or anything. This is just my observations, what I'm picking up on, and wishful thinking. So I think Jim Carrey will keep returning as Robotnik, at least for the foreseeable future, which might just be movie 3. And if not, these are some ideas that I think they could take to continue the movie franchise, in which case his first 2 or 3 movies would be the like Robotnik / Eggman saga. I saw somebody mention that, one idea could be taking Robotnik and, he gets distorted from, or mutated from chaos energy from the Master Emerald, and he becomes this like grotesque, like fat Robotnik, in which case they can CGI like future Robotnik, which is possible. But one of the things I thought about that was, there is that idea, But the idea of him getting fat, becoming Fat Robotnik, and Jim Carrey saying in a recent interview how he would love to see the evolution of Robotnik to get closer and closer to the games. I could see him donning the fat suit. Like maybe he gets so frustrated because he's kind of going mad, Robotnik. As Jim Carrey said it, he shaved his head because he lost to Sonic, and he's like trying to overcome his weaknesses, and he's like, oh no, that's loser hair, like get rid of what makes me a loser. So it's, I guess, a mix of that and going mad, and I think in his descent to madness, and his frustration over losing to Sonic, he can resort to binge drinking those lattes of stones and put on some weight. Like I could totally see that. In the next movie, he's put on some weight, and then like the next movie's prequel comic will be like Robotnik's drinking lattes, and he's got a little bit of a gut, and they're like, you might want to slow down. Like Stone might be like, you might want to slow down those lattes, and he's like, oh, when I ask for your opinion, I will, or something like that. Classic Robotnik. That's not necessarily an idea of where they can go without Jim Carrey, but that's just an idea of where they can go to get closer to game Robotnik. Or if they want to make their own adaptation of it, just like how the old Sonic cartoons, and therefore the old Archie comics made a fat Robotnik who is very menacing. Just ideas thrown out there for the future of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie universe, and I hope it keeps going past movie 3 as long as it's good. I mean, I want to see more. Just like how the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been going on for really long now. And I would love to see them go. I mean, they don't have to go that long, but I would love to see them going a number of movies as long as they're good. And they don't start replacing actors because those actors don't want to come in and they're like, oh yeah, we still got to make the movie. So, Sonic doesn't live with Tom Wachowski anymore. He lives with this person now. Like as long as they make it, like as long as they make those sequels at the same quality, I think it would be a lot of fun to see this as a continuing movie series. But if they're not gonna try to keep that quality consistent, then I don't know if we should have it keep going. But those are my thoughts. Again, I keep saying that and then rambling on some more. So leave in the comments what you think for ideas of where they can go without Jim Carrey. Or do you think he's going to return? Do you think he's going to leave it? Thoughts, comments, suggestions, anything? So, yeah. Talk to you later, guys.